everybody hear okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Laura O'Connor. I am CFMA's Membership Director, and I want to thank you for joining us today for our Member Benefits Series Zoom meeting to learn more about CFMA peer groups. Now I would like to introduce Kathy Wasner. She's Vice President, Member Services. Kathy's arranged for a great presentation today from a panel of both members that participate in peer groups, as well as some of the program facilitators. And I'll turn it over to you now, Kathy.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to mostly not share my screen. I'm just going to share my screen real quick so you can all see who our fantastic panelists today. As Laura mentioned, I am Kathy Wasner, CFMA's VP of Member Services. We also have two of our peer group facilitators here with us today, Jason Myers from BKD and John Zeiler from Crow, who will both talk about their experiences as facilitators. And then we have three peer group members, Brad Robinson, Kimberly Holfish, and Lori Eaker here as well to talk about their experiences as peer group members. So I just wanted to show all the names up there, but in general, we're gonna actually just look at each other. So I'm gonna stop sharing the screen. So thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm happy that you all want to learn about CFMA's peer group program. The goal of this session is to provide you with details on the program. It's also a forum for you to ask questions of me as staff who helps manage the program, questions of our facilitators, questions of some of our members. So feel free to either type questions in the chat or as we're going along, or we will have a Q&A session at the end. There will be time for questions as well. A little bit of background on the program. So the program, the peer group program works in the CFMA year. So it's April 1st through March 31st each year. The peer group application is open. The application is open until January 28th of this year. So it gives us a little bit of time to get the groups all up and running and everyone properly placed by the beginning of the year. If you do submit an application, you will hear from CFMA no later than February 11th on the status of your application. So even if you submit today, again, the period doesn't close till January 28th, so we're going to take a look at all of them once the application process closes. So we will take a look. Again, you won't hear from us until about February 11th. We do match our peer groups based on revenue size, business type. We check union, non-union, a whole bunch of categories. We try to get you in a group that matches as many of those as we can. But our goal is really to make sure there's no competitive conflicts. So sometimes matching you too closely leads to some of those. So we do our best to get you into a group where you'll have rich, great conversation, but it's really important that you have no competitors in your group. So we do ask all of our our peer group members to sign confidentiality agreements each year. That way you can have open and honest discussions. But it is likely that members of your group will be from all over the country because we do try to get rid of those competitor conflicts. Our 2022-2023 peer groups will be final. The goal is March 18th. That way everyone's ready to go by April 1st. A couple just quick things about groups and how they operate. How often groups meet varies from group to group. Some groups meet monthly, some meet every other month, some on some different type of schedule. How often the group meets is really up to the group. So when you get into your group and get into that flow, it may vary from group to group. Meetings used to be by phone, but now that everything's video, meetings are via Zoom or some other video platform, which I think is nice because you get to have that even a richer experience. You can see people's nonverbal cues, people agreeing with you or questioning. So I think it's a richer conversation now that everything's video. Groups also meet in person 1 or 2 times a year. We did implement last year the option to also meet virtually. So there are still options for that if you're uncomfortable traveling or for whatever reason. So that is an option as well when you submit the application. All costs of traveling to the in-person meetings are the responsibility of the peer group. It's not part of the fee. The peer group fee covers facilitation. People ask sometimes, if this is a profitable program for CFMA. Our goal is not to make money on the program. Our goal is really to break even. This is a member benefit. And since the program began about 6 years ago or so, it's been an investment, not something for us to profit on. The cost for either virtual or one in-person meeting per year is $850. So it's very inexpensive. The cost for 2 in-person meetings is $1,100 per year. So much less expensive than some of the other programs that are out there. And that's some of the background information. I'll join you again at the end to wrap up. But now I'm going to turn it over to our facilitators to talk about the program. So Jason, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy. Great to see so many folks joining in here. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. We'll start off like we do with some of the calls, making sure that everyone's on mute. That way we don't get a ton of background noise on some of the virtual calls. But, you know, I think a lot of this program, we have the opportunity to, as we talk about a lot in our peer groups, a lot of times you're the only financial person or one of a few financial folks in your organization. And you want that sounding board or that opportunity to really engage with others that maybe think a little like you or want to, you know, explore some ideas that you and the organization are thinking about. It's a great sounding board for that. You know, in this environment, bonus has come up, compensation adjustments, you know, mid-cycle compensation adjustments. How are you dealing with supply chain? I think that the topics just are really flowing right now. You know, with all the different things going on, and you'll get a diversity in response. You might think to yourself, hey, I only want GCs in my group. If you're a GC, I would tell you I had a really powerful face-to-face peer group meeting where the GCs and the subs kind of took their own piece and said what the positives and negatives were of working with each other and how they could interact more with each other and improve that relationship. I thought that was really good. As you might guess, technology comes up a ton. Everyone wants to know what some of the latest and greatest things are. And so those just maybe give you a few samplings of topics. I would encourage each of you, if you know, the face-to-face are just such a special time to really get the chance to bond with each other and to connect. And it's, you know, it's easy when you're doing virtual calls, maybe to get some distraction in there, but when you're all sitting side by side with each other and really, you know, talking about issues or topics, that engagement you get, the dinner that you'll do that night, just really brings everyone together and really adds a lot of value to your monthly calls that come along with that over the remainder of the year. And so, you know, maybe really think about that. I know Kathy went over one face-to-face or two face-to-face. Maybe just think about, you know, what your goals, what you would like to achieve out of the peer group. And we can kind of use that as you kind of think about things. So I'll stop there because I want to give John a chance to, you know, reflect on some of his facilitation and give you some more insights, but we'll be glad to answer any questions you have after that.
Well, thanks, Jason. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. So I pretty much echo a lot of what Jason just said, but I should take up a little bit more minutes than just saying whatever he said, right? So anyway, it's actually, I got a little bit of a unique perspective this year because this is my first year doing it, right? I was our firm and me in particular just got involved with this year. I mean, I've been involved with peer groups before, but this one's been really nice because it's so regular, right? We're meeting once a month and you really get a chance to know everybody a little bit better than some of the other peer groups where it's twice a year or quarterly or once a year even, right? So it's been really the consistent and regular interaction makes a big difference in how well you get to know somebody, you know. And I will echo exactly what Jason said too about getting together as a group in person, because once you get to know people in person, it's funny, we had our social, you know, our calls for the first, I'd say 3 months, 4 months, maybe it was. And then those went, I thought, really, really well. And then we had our in-person one, which most of the people made it to. And then the calls after since then have been even more personal because everybody got to know each other over that period that we were together, right? You know, so not only from a good way too, right? Because you can kind of call people out and ask them for stuff, and a lot more kidding and camaraderie goes along with it now that you've had a few drinks with somebody. Once you break bread and have a few drinks with them, then you're allowed to kind of get a little bit closer to people and kind of get into them a little bit. So anyway, it's just been a really good experience for me. It's been better than more rewarding than I was expecting. You know, I just didn't know what I was getting into, and it's been great. So there's about 10 or so different contractors in my group, all, you know, similar size, not competition, all with the same common challenges, and they really interact. You know, I'm thankful. Maybe it sounds like for the most part, all the other facilitators that I know have had pretty good groups as well. So it makes a big difference. It's not real hard to put a to get people to talk for an hour when they're pretty passionate about what they're talking about. The other thing I think you got to point you to is not just Jason or I telling you these are the topics you're going to have. These are your topics, right? These are your meetings. You guys choose what you want to talk about. We're only there to help organize it, facilitate it, make sure there's some structure to it, and kind of keep the conversation going when it slows down a little bit. You know, the sessions are yours, right? So at the beginning of it, we kind of set out a plan of, what do you guys want to talk about, right? We brainstormed this. You know, our first meeting really wasn't a meeting about any topic. It was figuring out what topics do we want to cover. And we went through and came up with about a dozen things. We put them into a poll and sent them out to everybody and kind of force ranked them by weighted average and how wouldn't you want to do it. The other piece to that too is we also want to say we save some of the heavier lifting topics for when you're in person, so you can really get into it a little bit more. Because, you know, our sessions were an hour a month. And the in-person we decided to do was travel in the morning, half day, you know, meet from, 1 to 5, dinner that night, get up the next morning, meet again from 8 to noon, and everyone went back. So you only lost a night of travel doing it. And it allowed us to we did 4 sessions or 4 topics, 2 hours a piece on each day, so it worked out really, really well, allowed us to get into some different things and have some really good dialogue, so just lots of information sharing. People are comfortable doing so. They surprised. I was kind of surprised how confidential information gets shared there. I mean, there's what happens on a CFMA peer group stays at the CFMA peer group, and everyone is comfortable doing that. There's confidentiality agreements, signed NDAs, and everyone's comfortable sharing some pretty private things that are really close to a lot of the companies, whether it be personnel or ownership or what have you. I mean, so it's been some really good information shared. I've been really pleased at the dialogue that we've had and the professionalism that we've had as well. So it's been, like I said, it's been a great experience. I'm fortunate to be able to be part of it because just as much as they learn from me, and they learn from each other, I'm learning just the same. So it's been a great experience. So thank you. Feel free to reach out with any questions you have. For any of us, for Jason and I, from the facilitator standpoint, we'll be glad to answer. So that's all I had. I don't know who wanted to go next. I wasn't sure who was next, to be honest with you.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Jason and John, for your insights as facilitators. I appreciate that. I'm now going to turn it over to our peer group members. So Brad Robinson, would you like to share your experiences in a peer group?
Yeah, I'll be relatively brief. Jason is is our facilitator, and I'll just leave it at that. No, it's been awesome. I think seriously, having been a member of CFMA since the late 90s, having gone through leadership, being national chairman in 2015, and all the other benefits I've gotten out of CFMA, I can easily say that the peer group is the single greatest benefit I've had as a member. I don't think I can make any stronger statement than that. It's and really for 2 reasons. Number one, it is the one place that I can have a dialogue with general members and not have any noise for someone trying to sell me a product that I may or may not need. And that's not the bash associate members. It simply gives me the perspective of being able to have a conversation that's open and honest with any kind of noise about a product or a demo or something of that nature. I know a lot of us in accountants don't like to necessarily be sold to unless we actually want to, we would prefer to approach, at least that's my feeling. And this peer group allows us to keep that kind of isolated. And of course, if we want to go out and reach out to our associate colleagues, we can do so. And just to give you an example of the benefit very quickly, on one of our calls, our company didn't take part of the PPP, but we did we did take advantage of the employee retention credit this year. And our accounting firm, I'll try to stay on top of it, but obviously we've got other things going on, and I wasn't up to speed. And I was relying on our advisors to kind of keep us apprised. We qualified in the first quarter, and we weren't going to qualify in the second quarter. And we were talking about it in our peer group, and someone in the group goes, well, "Wait a minute, you automatically qualify. If you qualify in the first quarter, you qualify in the second." I didn't know that. And so when I went back to our CPA firm, our tax people, our local tax guy, he didn't know that. And so I literally said, he goes, "Well, I don't know that that's right or not." And I said, "Well, this is literally about a $3 million question I'm asking you. So if you get this wrong, well, fill in the blank." So that alone, we would have missed it. We would have missed we could have probably gone back and picked up the ERC, but the point is the timeliness of that conversation, when it happened, how it happened. I'll put it this way. I'll never have to ask my employer if I can be a part of the peer group. That alone, all of the owners, the CEO of our company, they said, whatever you need to do, whatever we have to pay, we'll pay it. So I don't know any more of an endorsement I can give than that. So I'll defer back to you, Kathy.
Thank you for that, Brad. Kimberly, you want to share your experience?
Okay, I should be unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I've been a part of the peer group since its inception, which I think was 2016. And the first year we were unfacilitated and it went okay, but I will tell you, I don't know if there's any unfacilitated groups anymore, Kathy, but now I would recommend every group be facilitated. It does run a lot smoother and they help us keep track of the topics that we haven't talked about yet. So, you know, the cost, as Kathy said, is for the facilitators, and it is very much worth every penny of it. From day-to-day things, we talk about healthcare. Everybody renews the healthcare around the same time. What is your healthcare looking like? What are you doing to try to mitigate some of that cost? Same thing, I don't know about all of you on the call, but the umbrella policies the last 2 years have gone crazy. So by being able to talk to our peer group about what the umbrella cost is and comparing it, you know you have a good price, or you know you can go back and maybe beat that price because other people maybe aren't getting the same increase as we had. Right now, I'm revamping our vacation and sick day policy. I'm sending it out to my peer group for comment to see, what do you have? Does this make sense to you? Or is there something that I'm not doing enough of or should do more of? And you really get honest feedback from everybody. During COVID, the PPP loans, everyone knows in the beginning, it was very complicated trying to get the regulations straight. We had long conversations on the PPP loans and administering them correctly and setting them up in the accounting system correctly. And same thing when we went to ask for forgiveness. You get a lot of good feedback, and no offense to tax accountants, but we all know they kind of bill like attorneys now. So, you know, this is a way to kind of discuss with people without getting that accounting bill also. During COVID, the work from home, you know, we could talk with each other all about how are you setting up someone from home, or are you working through COVID? Like my company never took off. How are you handling safety in the office to keep everybody safe and secure during COVID? The employee retention credit, when they went back and fixed it where if you had a PPP loan, you couldn't apply for the employee retention credit. Well, now you can. I had ignored everything on the employee retention credit because we had the PPP loan. So other people in my group were ahead of me because they were doing the employee retention credit, not PPP. So I was able to pick their brains about how do I go back? How do I do a revised 941 or amended 941? Because I've never done one before. And I got feedback from people on how to do that. If everyone remembers, they came out with new COBRA rules last year and you only had about 30 days to implement. We were passing emails to each other, the whole peer group, leading up to when that new COBRA rule had to be implemented. If I got something from my health insurance carrier, I sent it to my peer group. If they got something from theirs, they sent it to the rest of us. And we were helping each other draft those letters that had to go out to employees. That's just a sample of things that we talk about every month. We meet monthly on Zoom. We meet in person once a year. The in-person meetings, like someone else said, the first time you're in the group and you're getting to know each other, those in-person meetings are a great way to bond. You really do bond in those. And the dinners that we have at those in-person, people bring their spouses or teenage or adult children. We went to Denver this year, and someone in the group, their son works in Denver, so he was able to pick out the best restaurant to go to, and he came to the dinner. So it's really nice because you get to know people's families as well as just the employees of the companies. As far as the price, my company thought it sounded a little bit high, but when I started telling them what I was learning, they don't question it anymore. They see the benefit of it. They don't mind the cost of the travel. again, because I basically give them feedback probably quarterly. I'll write a short memo to tell them what I've learned, and they're very satisfied with it. They think it's worth every dime. I looked at another peer group, not to drop CFMA, but to add. It was one by one of our insurance carriers, has a really neat peer group. It was $8,000. And I didn't even go to my company and ask, because that's just way too much money. So I think this is cost effective. I think you learn a lot. I wouldn't give it up for anything. And the other thing to keep in mind, when you join a peer group, if it's not the right fit, next year you can ask to change. And it's okay. It's not a bad thing to leave a peer group and join another one. We had somebody leave because they decided they wanted to be more in a mechanical group that was just more specific to them instead of being in the hybrid group that we were in. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So don't feel if you get into a peer group and you don't think it's the right fit that you have to give up. You go to another peer group. And what I find is we have always welcomed new people with open arms. And, you know, the first time or two, they're very quiet because they can see we're bonded, but we're not a clique. You know, we draw them into the conversation. We make sure they're active on the calls. But as soon as we meet in person, anyone who was quiet, all of a sudden, boom, they're talking just like they've been with us from day one. So don't worry about joining a peer group in progress either, because if you're in a peer group, you're there because you want to talk, you want to compare. And we're all very accepting of each other. So don't be nervous if you get put into an existing peer group instead of a brand new one. You will fit in and bond perfectly well. So Kathy, I guess that I hit the broad topics there.
All right, thank you so much, Kimberly, for that. And now I'm going to turn over to Lori to share your experience.
I agree with everything that Brad and Kimberly have said. You know, this has been invaluable, and I know my company, we're working on our budget for next year, and I went to ask to see if I could retain my membership in the peer group, and I was told absolutely. Just the invaluable information that I get, share it. We were working on our hybrid work situation, and I was in the middle of our in-person peer group meeting, which we did not do in person this year. We chose to do it via Zoom, and I had some information that I could give to our group that was working on the hybrid based on what my peer group members had said. You know, it's just a resource that you can talk to people you're not in competition with. You know, with the NDA, the first thing we do typically in our in-person meeting is we look at everybody's their monthly reporting. And so you can kind of figure out, oh, gee, I should be working on that month. Maybe we should have that metric in our monthly reporting. So, you know, it's just an awesome resource to have. And I also like the fact that I'm in a hybrid group, so I have both subcontractors and generals in there. And I get to hear about things from, you know, what we're kind of making our subs do, even though they're not our subs, but I can hear, is that working, is it not? You know, so we can kind of think about it. You know, one of the topics that came up in our in-person meeting was subcontractor payment systems. And, you know, so we heard feedback from some of the subs saying Texture by far is the best. You know, so I was glad to hear that because that's what we use. But it's kind of reassuring sometimes of what we are doing. Hopefully we're doing the right thing, because my goal is to make it a pleasant experience for the subcontractors when they work with us. And so it's great getting that feedback from the subs. And one quick story is one of the guys in my group, his son was thinking about taking a job with our company in our Texas region. And so based on my feedback, he took the job and has been working with us now for a few years. So, you know, it's good to have that relationship with someone too, to just share your thoughts on the company as well from that perspective.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you to all of our peer group members for sharing your experiences. Does anyone in the group have a question for anyone?
Kathy, there's a question in the chat. What is the cost to join a peer group?
So yeah, so the cost is, again, if you're all virtual or one in-person per year, it's $850. If you are 2 in-person meetings per year, it is $1,100. And again, the cost is really for facilitation. So travel is in addition to that for your in-person meetings. And travel, let me quickly talk about in-person meetings. I know there's not, people will say like, where are the meetings held? It's up to each group to choose where the meetings are held. I know sometimes it's held at one of the facilitators companies at a BKD or Crow office in a city. Sometimes it's held at a member's office. Sometimes it's held somewhere completely different. So it really is up to each peer group to pick timing of meeting and where they want the meeting held. Any other questions?
We're good.
Hey, just a question here. I actually had an issue I shared on the application on the ERP. You know, there's a box that says other, and I filled it in, but it wouldn't accept it because I had to check one of the check boxes. So
yes, thank you for letting us know. We've actually corrected going forward, and we've then corrected your response to make sure you did. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah,
I know
thanks.
someone pointed it out to us earlier, and we did fix on the application. You had to pick your ERP system, and we put a whole bunch, and then we have an other, but other isn't a choice. So you have to pick one, and then you can type other. So we did fix that. And again, thank you for letting us know that no matter how many times you test something, you always miss something. So thank you.
Kathy, we had a couple of questions in the chat. I think you covered this one, but do all the groups converge in the same city for the in-person meeting?
Yep. Nope, they do not.
And do you match us geographically?
We don't. Again, because we want to make sure that you don't have competitors. You know, you may have someone who's fairly local to you, you may not. Most groups are fairly spread out around the country, and it really is just to avoid competitors. Because you know, a bunch of our peer group members talked about all of the great information they share, and you're not going to share that with someone local who's a competitor. So that is the most important factor in our groups, is making sure you do not have a competitor. So typically folks are going to be fairly spread out geographically.
And then what is the time commitment outside of the meetings?
I think that varies meeting to our group to group as well. Actually, either facilitators, do you want to talk about what do you know what your groups do outside of meetings? Do they, or any of the peer group members?
I can chime in a little bit. I mean, not much. I mean, what we ask them to do is just help, you know, about a week in advance of the meetings, help like this Monday, we're talking about succession planning and ownership succession and stuff like that. So, but what specifically do you want to talk about? So I'll try and drag out some more agenda topics from them for them to pick out. So there really isn't much work there in terms of the monthly meetings. Occasionally we've kind of set up, I don't know, it's really just more of an email system where someone might have some spontaneous or impromptu questions where they could send it out to the group and get responses back. I told them, I said, the only price of that is you have to summarize the results and send it back out to the group then, you know, so you can share it then with everybody. So anyway, so that's really it. It's all on your own. I think there might have been a little bit more prep for the in-person stuff because we each took a turn to kind of present a little bit more in depth of their financial statements and their dashboards and their KPIs and stuff. So it really wasn't work. It was just bringing some information and explaining what they already do, you know, so.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I would tell you, for the face-to-face, for us, you have a little more homework, if you will. We try to get those agendas set. We'll actually start talking about it a month before we go, and then hone in on the actual topics. But then, for instance, someone mentioned in the group, I can't remember which one of you did it, but internal reporting packages. So one of the sessions that we did in one of our groups, and we've done it a couple of times now, is you bring your internal reporting package and you present to the group, and then it gives the group a chance to, you know, hey, what do you like? What do you don't like? What do you do in yours? Hey, I'm going to take that and use that in our internal reporting package. I had one CFO, I'm not kidding, had, I think, 84 tabs in an Excel spreadsheet. It took him all this time to get it done. And at the end of it, we all asked him, do you really need to do that much? He's cut out like 40 of his tabs. He's still got 40, but the dialogue and the sharing that goes on in that prep there might be a little bit more, but your monthly calls are really just, you know, the topics that you want to cover and preloaded questions. I think that's a huge thing for the peer groups to do. It's like anything, right? You get out of it what you put into it, and the more, you know, you think about it, throw out topics, the engagement there is critical.
And I'll just add where I had said, like I sent everybody sorry, I'm getting feedback. Is it okay now? Okay. Where I sent everybody my revised vacation policy for comment, what normally happens is no one really looks at it before the next meeting, but it'll be on the agenda for the next meeting that we want to talk about vacation and sick time policies. And that's where they'll really look at mine, unless sometimes they'll look at it and send comments back in between. And also when I said we were sending the Cobra stuff out, yeah, it took 2 seconds to forward it to everyone in the group. Really outside of the meetings, there isn't any work to do. It's not going to take up much of your time. Getting ready for the in-person, you might see a few more emails flying back and forth, but the in-between meetings is mostly for timely stuff that, you know, you're sharing maybe an email that you got on a topic that we were talking about, something new on the employee retention credit, like they took it away fourth quarter in the bill that passed a few weeks ago. So there's no fourth quarter employee retention credit. So we're passing emails on that, but it's not a lot of prep work to get ready for the meeting. It's not a lot of outside time. So I would say your time commitment is not really a factor in deciding if you want to be part of the peer group or not. It's the monthly meetings and the in-person.
Thank you all for
I've
answering
got
that.
2 more questions in the chat. If you,
Okay.
what type of positions from a company would you expect to participate in the peer group? CFO, controller, et cetera.
So yeah, so typically CFO, controller, you know, your VP of finance, depending on what the title is, those are kind of the main ones, but a lot of CFOs, a lot of controllers for the most part.
And then are the groups grouped by revenue?
Primarily, yes. That's a good question because I'm not sure if I mentioned that earlier. That's one of the main factors we look at. You will see if you do go through the application, we ask a whole bunch of things, but we do kind of start at revenue. We do have a couple of groups, and hopefully someday the program is so big we can have lots of groups like this. We have a couple of groups, I think we have 2 that are just subs. So their range might vary a little more because folks found more value in just having those, you know, sub conversations. But in general, we do match by revenue size.
In a lot of the questions on your survey, Kathy, have really tried to pull some of that stuff out because, as you all know, $100 million GC is not the same as $100 million sub. So a lot of that played out very early on when CFMA started out in the peer group. So every year they continue to just try to improve it and make it better. So that way you kind of get with that core group that you want to be with. But I think Kimberly mentioned it earlier, and I would 100% agree. One of the huge benefits as well is if you're getting a group, you're like, I've been in this group for 2 years. I like all the people. There's nothing wrong with it. But I had one that they wanted to grow and they wanted to know what they were going to have to deal with as they continued to grow. So they went to a larger peer group, larger revenue size, because they wanted to have that exposure to their group. So I think Kimberly highlighting that was a very meaningful add to this conversation.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I'm glad you brought that up, Kimberly, because we have had people who from year to year, again, just feel like they want to move, or they've been in one group for a while. They want to just get in with some different folks, or, you know, something changes. Just let me know and we will make sure that we do move you for the next year. So that is a nice option. You know, you're not just stuck in your group forever unless you want to be. But if you want to move, we'll move you. All right. Any more questions?
The last one I have in the chat is, are associate members involved at all?
They're not. This is a general members program only. I think as Brad brought up earlier, you know, you really want to be able to dive into topics and dive into everything. So it's really important that we let our general members just talk amongst themselves, and we do not have any associate member involvement at all. This is open only to generals. Although we do love our associate members, but we do want to keep, you know, there needs to be a little bit of a sacred space for the general members to get together. And this is kind of it. So.
All the questions I have in the chat at the moment.
All right. Anyone else have a question? All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. All the information on the peer groups, a whole bunch of like the FAQs and a whole bunch of information on the process.
Free stuff as well, so that's good.
We do?
Yeah, with those files.
Okay. So all the information is on our website. It's cfma.org/peer groups. So nice and easy to remember. There's again lots of information as well as the application if you do want to apply for the program. You can also email me or our peer group at cfma.org is kind of the peer groups email, which will go to Becky in our office, and I will take a look at that as well. So any questions that you have, even if you're looking through the peer groups page on our website, any questions, feel free to reach out and we'll get you any answers that you need. So thank you all so much for joining us.